Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This thread we post creepy experiences in the woods. I guess Greentext is cool, but I honestly prefer the way a story sounds when written properly. Anyway, I have a few to share. When I was a kid, we had an extensive forested area behind our house which I used to explore. Not too far from the house there was a huge husk of an old dead tree which had been uprooted, but the top was lodged in the canopy of the trees around it. I used to climb up and see how far I could go. One day it was very misty and dark. See pic for comparison, and as I climbed up, I heard a man call my name. I didn't know my father and just lived with my mother at the time, so I was curious to see who it was. But if I leaned over the dead tree to get a look, I ran the risk of falling off. He said my name again, and then again, and I told him I couldn't see him. He told me to stop being a scaredy cat, and to lean over further so I could see his face. He kept repeating that if I saw his face, I would be very interested. He creeped the shit out of me. I said no, and he got angry. He said if I didn't jump out of the tree, I was easily high enough to at least badly injure myself, he would climb up and get me. I started crying, and thankfully my mother was outside in the garden and came to find me.
I once saw a guy smash burying some bones in the woods. He didn't see me, but he was carrying the bones like you would carry a child. He was creepy looking too. He wore a suit. In the middle of the fucking forest.
Not exactly in the woods, but on a paved road next to a very densely wooded area. Me and my father, along with my sister, my father's girlfriend, and possibly her son, were walking down this very long paved road. I don't remember where it was, or why we were there, or where we were going. I just remember we were there. There was a parked bulldozer behind us, so there might have been construction happening around. We might have been at a campsite. Anyway, we were walking, and suddenly, we come to a small break in the trees. The trees are right next to and parallel the road, so it's very noticeable. There were a few small trees blocking the way, but you could still look in. We stop, and look in, and there's a small pond or swamp-like area right there, right next to the road. In the pond is the body of a biker, face down, bike in the pond, helmet still on. He was wearing a yellow dress shirt-like shirt and jeans, and his skin was purple and bloated. We just kept walking. No one said anything, and I don't think it was ever reported.
One time in the woods I came across a dog skull nailed to a tree. Me and some friends decided it was a good place to get high, and we smoked some weed there. He had a massive baggie and we got pretty stoned for the rest of the day. After we had come down, the sun was setting, and I decided to test how high I was feeling by climbing the tree. I climbed up the trunk and found there was a hollow part near the top. Inside it were literally too many skulls and other bits of dog bone to count. Peering up into the higher branches, I saw that there were more skulls nailed to branches higher up than I thought one could climb. We loved that creepy fucking tree and went back there often. The last time was a few months ago, and my friend swore it had a new skull on it. I don't know if it was new, but the skull was definitely whiter than most of the others, and the nail was shiny, not rusted like the rest.
When I was about 10 years old, I had a nightmare about some big-ass, giant, disgusting fly following me around and bumping into me and getting me all dirty and disgusting. This fly was about the size of a medium-sized dog. Eventually I woke up, freaked out, and then laid in bed until I went back to sleep. The next day, I went to school, and at some point during the school day I went to the restroom, delivered a number 2, and proceeded to wash my hands. I was the only one in there that I know of. As I washed, I notice a handful of little flies buzzing around nearby to my right. I stare at them for a couple seconds, think nothing of it, and dry my hands. Later, I went home, did homework, then, just before dusk, went into the woods down the road from my house a little ways. I wandered a ways into the forest and just explored for a while, before abruptly stumbling across the corpse of 2 dead rabbits, with what looked like fresh blood over stab or cut wounds. There was a swarm of flies around them, and I slowly began backing off. As I did so, a few of the flies flew straight at me, and I swatted them away. I then turned around and started running back to my house, not because I was really afraid, just startled, and I wanted to tell my parents about it. As I ran, I heard this extremely annoying and loud buzzing sound coming closer from behind. I turned my head to look and I swear I saw this massive swarm of flies around 20 feet behind me. I sprinted as fast as I could without looking back, and the buzzing sound slowly became fainter and fainter until I came within seeing distance of my parents' house. I didn't tell my parents about any of it. That night, I went to sleep, and had a dream about the same giant fly from my last dream. This time, in this dream, I was standing in the middle of the woods somewhere, and saw it flying around over me near the treetops, circling around. I started running, and it chased after me, before I finally came upon a small clearing and a cave. In this clearing was a fire pit with fresh wood placed in it, and a wooden stake in the ground. The fly flew past me overhead, and landed on top of the stake, staring at me. After a couple moments, the wood in the fire pit burst into flames, and the fly flew into it, burning up and dying. At that moment, a man came out from the dark cave, holding a long, 2-pronged fork, and impaled the burning corpse of the fly with it, and took it out of the fire. While it was still burning, he took a bite out of it, and swallowed it without chewing. He turned to look at me, and his shadow, cast by the fire, grew larger and larger until it encompassed the whole area. The light from the fire didn't radiate beyond the flames themselves. The entire surrounding area was just as dark as the rest of the woods. At this moment I woke up, freaked out again. The next day, after school, me and 2 friends go and explore the woods near my home again, and I take them to where I found the 2 dead rabbits, but they aren't there anymore. We wander a ways into the woods for what must have been at least an hour, trying to see if we could find a cave like the one in my dream. We never found one, and we went home just as it started getting darker. And now, whenever I see or hear a fly buzzing near me, I very nearly jump up out of paranoia.
A few years ago, my friend and I went on this hike to look for a rock that was shaped like a mushroom. My friend didn't tell me that she didn't know where it was. We got lost. I got kind of scared because it was getting dark. So, I started running around in the forest alone, 'cause my friend after a while just left me. I started to panic, but while running I saw a figure far in the woods. Just standing there. It was dark and short. I kind of thought it was a person, so I ran towards it. But while running towards it, it was moving away. Finally, I got close enough to it. Turned out it was one of those remembering car accidents tombstone thing. It led me to the road.
Going to Greentext because I'm too tired to write it up properly. Camping with friends out in the forests around our town. 9 p.m, full moon. Friend brought his dog with him, was sleeping by the fire. He suddenly wakes up and starts barking. We all grab the nearest weapon, gun laws in Australia, so this consists of shovels, machetes, knives, etc., because the place is notorious for illegal shroom farmers who are very inhospitable. Sitting around, waiting for the dog to go back to sleep. He did. Wakes up again half an hour later, barks some more, we get our knives and shit again. False alarm. An hour later, he does it yet again. Nobody bothers to pick up anything, keep chatting. Moon got covered by clouds, everything went a bit darker, so we all looked for some lamps to fire up. Dog keeps barking. Keep telling him to shut up. Finally shuts up as we get the lamps set up, but sits still, watching the little dirt road near our campsite. We sit down, the dog's owner was watching the dog carefully. We continue chatting when the dog owner suddenly tells us to be quiet. We all shut up and listen. Footsteps. Fucking footsteps. Someone grabbed a floodlight and shone it up the road. Nothing. Footsteps stop, though they were very faint, not all of us heard it. Turn light off. Nothing. Weird. Start chatting again. Footsteps come back, I heard them first this time. Bam, floodlight back down the road. Fucking nothing. Half of us are laughing, calling us paranoid. I'm creeped out now, so a few of us walk a little down the road to check it out. Absolutely nothing. Sit back down, kept talking. Barely 10 seconds before we heard, all of us, something running towards us, then a scraping noise in the gravel or dirt, then the footsteps sounded like they were running off back down the road. Holy shit, we were scared, grabbed weapons, shined the light back down the road. Fucking nothing. Nope. All of us went to bed. Fucking creepiest shit, we all still talk about it.
When I was younger, my dad and my younger sister and I were hiking around by a nearby river. We were walking along the floodplain and saw 3 or 4 little rundown huts. Sticks were used for the sides, and various brush used for the roofs. They were all uninhabited and empty, except for one, which contained a statue of Joseph, Jesus's human father, and a dead fish with one large bite out of the stomach. We had no idea what they were, or what they were used for. My guess was hobos, but why would hobos be living on a floodplain in huts?
I wish I could have freaky experiences in the woods. Here's the closest thing I came to. I was young, maybe about 8 years old, and I was camping with my family. My parents didn't want me walking off on my own, but eventually I did it anyway when they weren't looking. While I was walking, I came to this strange pathway where the trees sort of curved toward me. It creeped me out, but I kept going. Eventually the path came out into this weird place. It was covered with sand and there was a gigantic lake near the end of this long field of sand. The lake looked like it went past the horizon and the sun was just perfectly setting on the water. I got this weird feeling, kind of like I might have just died and gone to heaven. I decided that I should go back. By the time I got back it was dark and my parents were worried sick about me. They said I was gone for 4 hours, which was way longer than I thought. To this day I wonder if maybe that was some weird near-death experience. I always think about going back to that beach, but I could never remember the way.
I know what you mean. I haven't had any nearly as freaky as most of the stories in this thread. Granted, I bet a good few are fake. But nonetheless, let me tell a few of my stories. I've told this story on X a couple times. I call him the old man in the tree. And this is something that I personally experienced and basically got me interested in the paranormal. Sadly, it isn't that scary when compared to the other stories, but it's special to me. We first moved to this house when I was 3. It's a nice house on about 20 acres of hills and a few trees, not terribly wooded, but there still are trees loosely covering the hills. Wouldn't call it a suburb, but I wouldn't call it rural either. Anyways, to the northeast of my house is a little hill that is slightly higher than the hill my house is on. It's covered with a few trees, but in the center more or less rests an old oak that I now call the old man in the tree. Why do I call it this? Because when I first looked at it in the night, it appeared that there was some figure leaning up in the tree, against one of the main branches of the tree where the main root splits off into the main branches. I can tell that it's old using some simple logic. The tree has some burn marks on it, though it looks like it's healed mostly, but there has never been a fire while the house was here. The house itself was only used by one family before us. There is an old animal pen on my property that has decayed for the most part, but some of the metal wire and the burned pen stakes are left. So I estimate the tree to be a good 60 or more years. Now as for the figure, I soon figured out that it was just a limb that stopped growing, so that way with the lights of the town in the background allows it to form a silhouette which makes it appear that there is someone leaning up in the tree. Course if you stared at it long enough it looks like he moves or turns towards you. Course I was still young and never wanted to go near that thing. It didn't help that when my favorite cat was torn apart by the local coyotes, my mother gave it in form of Indian burial in the tree. In this kind of burial you put the few remains in a small fur pouch and hang it from a tree. So one year when I was in middle school, me and my friend were hanging out at my house one night when I told him about the tree. He finds the story interesting, so I go to the edge of my property where you can see him, just sitting in the tree. He's creeped out, but that only makes him more interested in him, so we go up to the tree to top off the eerie setting factor. There is a rope hanging from the tree. The family before us had a swing up there, but it had since fallen off and only the rope remained. So as we got up there we started to mess around, like the stupid middle schoolers we were. Hey, isn't this how cults are created and stuff? Yay, they start worshipping random shit like rocks and leaves. Hey dude, old man in the tree, I give my soul to thee. Ha, I can do one better. Old man in the tree, I shall forever worship thee. It continued on like that until I said this line. Old man in the tree, I give my blood to thee. And as if it was some cheesy horror movie, my finger started bleeding, and by bleeding I meant blood covering my hand. The strange part was that I didn't feel any pain whatsoever, so as you would expect we got the fuck out of there as fast as possible, screaming holy shit all the way down. When I got to my house and washed off the cut, I noticed something strange. The cut that made my hand bleed wasn't exactly a cut, it was a paper cut, a tiny little scratch. There is no way that a little cut like that would be able to cover my hand with blood. I'm not a HEMA or anything, and I know I didn't open an artery. The next day we went and checked. Sure enough, it wasn't a hallucination. There was dried blood on the leaves and the root of the tree. Well, I have a few more stories of that tree if you guys want to hear. They are even less freaky though. Although I do have one other experience when I went camping. Okay then, well, this one happened a couple years later. I think it was freshman year. Me, my friend from last time, and my different friend were all up hanging by the old man. We just call it that for short. We told the story to my different friend hoping to scare him a little. He wasn't freaked out in the least, even though he believed us. My friend from last time got irritated since he was scared and told him to hold my different friend down while he stabs him in the nuts with his plastic army knife. So before my different friend realizes what's happening, I get a good hold on him while my friend from last time pulls out his knife. As a joke, I guess, he looks up to the tree and says, "If the old man in the tree wants me to stab different friend in the nuts, may the dogs bark thrice." Now the whole time we were up here, dogs at my place had been barking, which made the whole neighborhood of dogs start barking. Regardless, to say they only stop after a couple hours after slowly dying down, which they hadn't shown any sign of. But right after my friend said this, the whole damn neighborhood went mute, and I mean dead fucking silent. Then we heard a asterisk woof woof twice, and silence. My friend who I was holding down smiled, while my friend from last time seemed annoyed and then stated, "If he wishes me to stab him, may they bark twice." Silence, then asterisk woof. Asterisk. May they bark once. Complete silence. I was quite befounded. It wasn't fear but sheer, how would I describe it? What? Well, while me and my friend were trying to interpret what this meant, my different friend took this opportunity to break free of me and escape. We argue that it was because my different friend is a bit of a druid that the tree saw him as one of his followers. I have one more story about this tree. It's a little creepier than this, but I suppose not as creepy as my first. Then I'll go ahead and tell the other one. This one isn't directly me, But I was there when it happened, so believe what you want. I guess me and friend from the first time are hanging out on top of the hill smoking. Beautiful view of the town and the city in the distance. Anyways, we are both high as fuck. The old man is on the very top of the hill behind us while we are at the more northwest side of the hill. Now I'm having a great time. I go fucking bonkers when I get stoned, and my friend is having the exact opposite, having a really bad trip. As he said, I try to cheer him up for a while. First I rubbed moss on him, which I think made him worse. Then I ran around screaming about how I'm in Vietnam and we need artillery support or something. I told him much tomorrow is going to fucking burn an itch since I've been rolling around in poison oak for the last half an hour. After all this I noticed I'm thirsty as hell. I ask if he is too and he nods. I make sure that he is okay if I leave him alone and then I run back to the house to get some drinks. When I get back up, he's in the feeble position next to the old man in the tree. I freak the fuck out and yell at him to get up. He slowly gets up. His eyes are wide with terror and we go back to our house. We go up to my room and munch down while watching stupid shit on YouTube. He doesn't want to talk about what happened. The next day he's chilled out enough and he tells what happened when I left. While he was feeling bad, he went up to the old man and started humming and singing one of his favorite songs. He was freaking out like any normal bad trip when shit started going bad, fast. He began to have trouble seeing and all of a sudden he said he heard a voice talking to him. Something that wasn't like any normal human voice but something deep like the earth itself. It was saying, forgive me, repeating the lyrics of one of the songs he sung. Now I know he was having a bad trip, but all we smoked was weed, not anything like acid or something that would make you trip hard like that. I had the same stuff and I didn't hallucinate or anything, so I'm not sure what exactly happened that night. Anyways, me and my friend are on a camping trip. We came originally to go rappelling in one of the nearby caverns. It's called Moaning Caverns. It's in Cali, in the Sierra Nevada foothills, I believe. So after me and my friend set up the campsite with my family, we decide to explore the area a bit. We head out of the camping grounds and find an old abandoned water storage. There is a small building the size of a porta potty. We can't see into though it's too dark. My friend decides to pull out the camera on his phone and record for a bit while I explore the surrounding area a little. I see what looks like to be a plateau on the top of the hill. The water storage tank was about halfway up the hill, but it's getting dark, so we decide to call it a night and check it out tomorrow. So the next day we hike to the top and find what my friend tells me to be a witch's circle, a circle of trees facing away from each other for those who don't know, and that it's supposed to hold some meaning. I didn't really understand, I just thought it was cool and ran around checking out the place. My friend said he wanted to go back because he was feeling some strong vibes. This worried me a little since he told me a story where he felt these Vitas one the day he almost died via an axe falling where his head would have been if he hadn't stopped to feel these vibes of his. I agreed somewhat, saying we'd head back soon after I checked out the area a little longer. I decided to check out the hill on the opposite side of where we walked up. I saw a large stump where it began to slope down and got up on it to have a better look of the place. As I stood there looking around, I began to hear something. It was so quiet at first I couldn't tell what it was other than it was constant. It slowly grew louder and louder. It was the sound of a little girl humming. At this point I was freaking out cause I couldn't tell where it was coming from and I couldn't see anyone. I yelled at my friend and told him what I was hearing and that I was going back now. I was surprised that he ran up to me and stopped me, grabbed my arm and told me to calm down. I was having a hard time, of course, I could still hear it. But I realized why soon after we were heading down. When I panicked and started to run, I was going back the wrong way, going deeper into the forest instead of going back to the campsite. To this day I still don't know what that was. I mean, we were at least a good mile or two out of the campsite, so I don't think there would be some random girl hiding in the bushes humming.
Pick is of the Devil's Stomping Ground. a famous location somewhere in the US where no shit will grow, and weird things have been sighted at night. In my town we have an almost exactly similar clearing in the woods where nothing will grow. It is not too well known and is hard to get to, as it is far off the beaten trail. Me and my friend decided to spend a night there. We picked a clear night after a boiling hot day and set up camp at around 5. We shared a decently sized tent and for the most part just thought of it as a fun trip, a kind of cool way to waste a night in the woods. But the creepiness of the place, in retrospect, underlined everything we did. Telling ghost stories that night was not fun or exciting, it was uncomfortable and tense. For one thing, even during the day when birdsong filled the air in every other patch of the forest and the hum of insects followed you everywhere, it all faded into nothingness by the time you had reached the clearing. There was no noise. The sound of the wind was even so uncommon that when a light breeze swished through the nearby trees it gave us a shock. It was dead quiet and eerie as hell. One incident in particular tainted the night. As the sun was setting, we glimpsed a stoat chasing a rabbit in the undergrowth. The rabbit was hopping very fast in a forward trajectory, toward the clearing. It was outrunning the stoat. As soon as it reached the border of the clearing, however, it made a sudden turn to avoid it, and fell over. As it was just about to get back up, the stoat leapt on it and savaged it until it was nothing but a limp pile of bloody bone and fur. If the rabbit had just gone through the clearing it would probably have escaped. Yet it avoided that circle of dirt like it was hell on earth. Everything about the place seemed lifeless. The atmosphere was lightened only by me and my mate smoking some weed, and even then, things didn't seem entirely right. That night, though, was one of the most disturbing experiences of my life. We were woken at around 3 in the morning to the sound of thumping against the thin walls of the tent as though something were being thrown. Turning on a torch we discovered that rocks, sometimes quite large ones, were hitting the tent. Some seemed to be being thrown, but most were coming straight down, as though being dropped from up high. Terrified we staggered out of the tent and started shouting at whoever was fucking with us to stop, shining the light all over the place. But we saw and heard no one. Even when we saw a rock shoot from out of the forest, we saw no one throwing any. Soon we were being pelted with rocks that were, I can say with full honesty, being dropped on us. My friend received several bad bruises. I was quite unharmed. Returning to the tent only added to the terror though, as now the stones stopped coming down as heavy and some animal was wailing in the distance. It sounded almost human, like a woman screaming, but then it warped into a howl. The worst thing about the sound was how loud it was and how near it seemed to be, despite the echo. My friend was paralyzed with fear and I was whispering frantically at him that we would have to get out, escape. We couldn't even move however, and slowly the rocks stopped coming completely. The wailing, which seemed to loop like a broken record, became softer and softer and eventually we could no longer hear it at all. However, unnerving events continued till morning and we did not sleep. We heard at various times what sounded like a child laughing in the woods, and more than once my friend became nearly hysterical and said he saw hands press into the tent wall behind me. I did not ever see these, but I believe him. In the morning light we left as soon as possible. On the ground around the tent there was a bizarre circle etched in the dirt. We do not often speak of it, but we are not sure what happened that night, paranormal or not.
Still have nightmares about this. Grew up in a village called Eyam in England. Better known as the Plague Village. The village is surrounded by huge foothills and dense woodland. There is a particularly famous spot outside of the village down an old overgrown path called that was named by the locals the Death. This is where they would hold the funeral services for the plague victims during the outbreak. It's a huge strangely shaped cave-like thing. When I was a younger me and all my friends were deathly afraid of this place. You would hear stories about floating vicars and ghosts that would follow you home. In the daytime we would go down and explore the area surrounding it and find cow skulls on pikes littered about. One day one of my school friend suggests we man up and go can explore the death. We all agree and go down about 4 p.m. with a torch. We get there and only 2 of us will actually go inside the cave. Me and my friend, 3 other of my friends wait outside. We go in, it feels horribly cold. I felt like I was being watched the whole time. We get to the end of the cave. It's not very deep. My friend finds a small crack that you can squeeze through. He starts to proceed down the narrow space with me following. All of a sudden he screams and runs at me. He drops the torch. I'm stuck in the entrance to the crack while he trying to push his way past me in the complete darkness. We eventually get out and run out of the cave. All other friends decided to fuck off and leave us. We practically run all the way home just as the sun sets. He is still crying as we reach his house. We don't talk about it what happened until the next day at school. He tells me he saw a white face smiling at him in that narrow crack, and that it was coming towards him. Safe to say we never went down there again.
Hot smoggy summer. Southern Ontario. Drinking, smoking in a forest late at night at approximately 1 to 2 in the morning. With my friend and 3 girls we had started seeing. The forest runs down a small dirt trail surrounded on both sides by countless trees and steep hills. A forest filled with small creeks, old bridges. Suddenly all 5 of us hear and acknowledge an extremely loud, strong, shrill shrieking echoing from the very end of the forest that has a culvert for large animal crossing below the only road above. Very steep hills on either side of the road. Now we don't see the culvert or road as it is hundreds of yards down through the winding pitch black faintly moonlit forest. Keep in mind we only just started to drink, so mind frame isn't in question, and I'm a zoology major that has extensive knowledge in native animals. This noise piercing our eardrums is like nothing I've ever heard before or since. If you can imagine, it is a mixture of a rabbit screaming as it is being attacked, decapitated, ripped apart, and killed, and a very clear blood-curdling human voice. That of a woman being murdered screaming for her life. We all immediately think this has to be a person. Girls are shitting bricks. Me and my buddy feeling creeped yet protective. Drinking liquid courage start down the path to investigate with a flashlight as the girls hang back around 30 yards behind us huddled together. Noise continues as we near a bridge before a bend in the trail. I start yelling, stupidly, to warn or ward off those, or it, with our impending arrival. This obviously causing a commotion with those friends of mine not wanting to push it or travel further. My buddy at the time is a 6'3+, 200 pounds man-child. We are both very bold young strong kids, but he is holding me back because this sound and situation feels really wrong. All of a sudden the noise stops completely due to my boisterous announcement or our group's advancement. The forest is eerily quiet. The girls behind us decide it is far too much to handle and start to book it in the opposite direction back down the trail to the only desolate path up a steep dirt hill. Me and my friend freeze in our tracks. Waiting. Watching. Listening for any more commotion or sound. All of a sudden down the trail bounding towards us just outside of our flashlight's reach. With full yellowish-red reflective lenses in its eyes glaring from at the very least over 6 feet high from the ground, comes a dark shadowy creature. Running towards a group of loud, multiple people down a lone dirt road, heading directly towards us at a very strong pace. We are fucking out of there and not looking back. Running in the opposite direction. Following the girls' vapor trails. Fucking off all the fucking way up into the main roads and home. Now deer is the only remotely large animal with reflective lenses around these parts. And these deer do not kill other animals, do not nearly reach 6 feet 0 inches in height, and do not run towards groups of brash overconfident people in a forest down a wide open cover-less trail at night when their vision and senses are heightened so they can avoid people like us. The girls no longer come around. We no longer go into that forest at night.
In my senior year I lived in this tiny town surrounded by this huge, dark forest. I used to go there after school or when I cut classes to smoke and hang out with this kid, who I thought had run away and was living in there. He showed me all these ruins in the depths of the forest, and used to steal all my cigarettes. It's funny though, because when I mentioned to my friends at school that I had been hanging out in the forest, they all shit themselves. They just couldn't believe it. Apparently, it was widely known as haunted, and that no one was willing to head in there. Even the people who thought it was bullshit didn't want to try. I thought it was weird, because I had been spending a majority of my time in there and hadn't had any paranormal shit happen to me. Apparently, there had been a kid that went to the school in the 90s, who, 2 weeks before graduating, had disappeared without a trace. They sent search teams out for him and everything, but never found anything. He was thought to be the one haunting the woods. I headed there after school a few days later, and the dude I had been hanging out with there got all weird when I told him what my friends had said. I guess he had a pretty good reason to, in the end. It's sort of a long story. I noticed weird things about this kid, like how he was open and friendly, but when I asked him certain things, he would be completely distant about his answers. He was always wearing the same white t-shirt and jeans, and never left this goddamn forest. I invited him to come hang out at my place, where it was warm. This all happened in September, October, November, or with my friends and I when we had something planned for the weekend, but he got all sad and said that he couldn't, and didn't elaborate on that. He also used to get really pissed off when I told him about the sporty dudes at school who didn't like me. As I said, I assumed he was a runaway. Once when it started to rain when we had been heading for this old cemetery in the woods, we took shelter in this old cottage. There had been a mattress and sleeping bag on the floor, along with a guitar case. But when I told him about what people had been saying about the woods, he got shifty and quiet, and asked him what was up, and he just said, "I didn't want you to find out," and I sort of put 2 and 2 together. This dude had the same first name as the kid who went missing, and I started paying attention, and when he shifted, the leaves he was sitting on wouldn't crumble like they did for me. That along with everything else made the reality of the situation obvious. He told me his story. I sort of feel like I shouldn't be telling it. The abandoned cottage had been his getaway, and one day after school a group of kids who regularly picked on him had followed him there, and roughed him up a bit. At one stage they pushed him, and he fell back onto this old stone wall and broke his neck. Since then he had been stuck in the forest, couldn't move more than 15 feet out of it. He told me that for the first few months after he was killed, he couldn't move away from his body, had to stand around and watch himself decompose. I still don't like to think about that part. It's so weird though. He could smoke. He could touch me. If I paid close enough attention, I could just make out the forest through him. But other than that, he was just like any other person.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.